Good morning, everyone. The April board meeting is called to order. Welcome. Let's begin with the members of the public who have signed up and wish to speak. Mr. Morello?
Mr. Chairman, we have 11 speakers this morning. As usual, we ask all of our speakers to observe our 2-minute speaking period so that we can treat everyone equitably. Our first speaker is Murray Bowden. He'll be followed by Paul Carr. Mr. Bowden.
Good morning. I was at the Safety Committee meeting this morning, and I was quite impressed by the way the thinking of the people that work for MTA are going forward. The one thing that wasn't mentioned was positive train control. Positive train control is a technology that's no longer useful, and the auto stop feature on cars needs to be moved to trains, and it will increase the safety that they were talking about this morning. So one last thing is remind yourself, go back and look at positive train. You got it on your cars, you got it on your trucks, you got it on your buses. Why don't you have it on your trains?
Thank you very much, Paul Carr. To be followed by Sarah Kim. Mr. Carr.
Good morning. My name is Paul Carr. I'm here with Building Alcohol Ad-Free Transit, which is BACT, a coalition of over 160 youth and community-based organizations throughout New York City who are dedicated to removing alcohol advertising from subway buses and stations of the New York City Transit. I'm here today to call the MTA Board to consider adding alcohol to your list of prohibited advertising in the advertising policy, alongside the line that already prohibits tobacco and other select form of advertising. We would recommend that prohibit of advertise that promotes alcohol-related products and alcohol-related services of New York City Transit and vehicles and properties. As a person who works in policy, I work with Gay Men's Health Crisis. We are disproportionately, the community has for a long time been centered around alcohol advertising. These are young kids. These are their school buses, particularly those minorities of African American, Latino heritages that are at highest risk. We're on the verge of ending an epidemic, but yet they're being educated on their way to school every day on alcohol use, and we need to safeguard their future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Kim, who will be followed by Adrian Abade. Ms. Kim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Kim from Korean Community Services. I'm a coalition member of BAFT, Building Alcohol Ad-Free Transit. I'm here to testify. Alcohol advertising removal has been done in many cities across the country. They either removed the alcohol advertising or never allowed it in the first place. These cities include Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, San Diego, Seattle, Phoenix, and Indianapolis. New York City is usually the leader in public health, so let's catch up. I'm here to share our story. I see many reports from Korean ethnic media and family counseling organizations. There is an increasing number of alcohol addiction among Korean teenagers and minors. In addition to that, I'm really concerned about hepatitis B-related chronic liver disease in our Korean community, which leads, as you clearly know, liver cirrhosis and liver cancer. And last year I was sitting on 7th train toward the main street. I spotted many advertisements to alcohol provided minibar.com. The advertisements promote give you your spiritual lift, free celebrate your everyday, and stop and smell the roses. And the alcohol advertisement promotes free alcohol delivery in under 1 hour, $100 of a discount on your first order, and then the promotion code was SUBWAY. So I really disappointed that it could promote Subway MTA promote alcohol consumption, and then it looks very attractive for teenagers and all others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adrian Abate to be followed by Cedric McClester. Ms. Abate.
Good morning. My name is Adrienne Abadi, and I'm the Executive Director of the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness and the Coalition Director for Tackling Youth Substance Abuse. I am also here today with Building Alcohol Ad-Free Transit, a New York City coalition dedicated to removing alcohol advertising from NYC public transit. I'm here today to call on the MTA Board to consider adding alcohol to your list of prohibited advertising in your advertising policy. The reason we are calling on you to make this change is because alcohol advertising affects underage drinking. Underage drinking is a major public health issue in New York City, leading to problems like teen pregnancy, problems in schools, and over 7,000 emergency visits each year. The earlier that young people start to drink, the greater the chance that they will become alcohol dependent in life and engage in other dangerous behaviors such as getting into fights and attempting suicide. But I want to convey what it means for my Staten Island community that has been in the throes of a substance abuse epidemic involving alcohol and opioids. Staten Island youth have much higher rates of alcohol use than New York City on average, and the average age of first use is 13 years. Alcohol advertising normalizes this early use and can result in a lifetime of addiction, a chronic health issue that is difficult to treat. Prevention is the best approach, and limiting alcohol advertising is an effective strategy. As a first step, we would like to request a meeting with MTA staff and members of the MTA Finance Committee to meet with our coalitions to further discuss this issue. And I just want to hold up a picture of daycare students on the 14th Street platform right next to an alcohol ad. So it's pervasive. We might not notice it, but the kids do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cedric McClester, and then Angelo Ortiz.
Good morning. My name is Cedric McClester, and I represent Forward South Bronx Coalition, a diverse group of community partners against underage drinking and other substance misuse. We're located in the Longwood-Hunts Point section of the South Bronx, where underage drinking is the #1 substance use misuse issue. And alcohol advertising, particularly on the subways, is everywhere. Youth drinking is a pervasive social problem with well-documented consequences, including increased risk of death from injury, engaging in risky sexual behavior, and sexual assault, perpetration, or victimization. The societal costs of underage drinking are significant, an estimated $62 billion in 2010. Exposure to alcohol advertising influences young drinkers to drink more and experience more alcohol-related problems later in life. Local governments bear the brunt of the alcohol-related public health and safety costs that far exceed revenue generated by alcohol advertising. Alcohol ad revenue to transit agencies must be weighed against the significant public health and safety costs of alcohol-related harm. And I just want to read some recent research by the Urban Health, which demonstrates that it is not only a public health problem, it's an issue of health equity and social justice. The researchers went out and surveyed subway stations in the Bronx. They found that advertising for alcohol were more likely to be found in neighborhoods with higher rates of poverty, lower educational attainment, higher percentages of Black and Hispanic residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClester. Angelo Ortiz to be followed by Robert Pezzolesi. Mr. Ortiz, okay.
I'm Robert Pezzolesi. Mr. Ortiz is just briefly delayed.
All right, thank you.
Good morning. I am Bob Pezzalezzi, and I'm with the New York Alcohol Policy Alliance and also with the Building Alcohol at Free Transit campaign, calling on the MTA Board to consider adding alcohol to your list of prohibited advertising categories in your advertising policy. As you know, transit advertising revenue accounts for a very small part of the overall revenue received by New York City Transit. And what's more, alcohol is not even among the biggest categories of advertisers on the MTA. We know that other categories of advertisers would be quick to fill any ad space. In fact, that's exactly what happened with Boston. When they removed alcohol advertising from the MBTA, they had record high advertising revenues in the years following. And this issue is especially important in light of recent research that alcohol consumption is a leading preventable cause of cancer, and we know that excessive alcohol consumption often begins in childhood and adolescence. Toward that, again, we would encourage you to add removing alcohol advertising in your list of prohibited advertising categories. Thank you for your time and attention this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pezzalezzi. Give us a wave if Mr. Ortiz returns before we're done. Louis Bailey, to be followed by Mary Parison. Mr. Bailey.
Good morning. My name is Louis Bailey. I'm a community organizer for We Act for Environmental Justice. And I'm also with the Bath Coalition. Our coalition has had 5 press conferences and rallies, some of them with middle schools and high school students in the Bronx, Staten Island, and Flushing, Queens. We continue to organize to make our voices heard on this issue. We have the backing of 27 city council members on the resolution 922 of 2015. I want to talk specifically about the Bronx. As the Yankee season just started, there are black label liquor ads on the number 4 and BD platforms. Now, I don't know about you, taking kids to games, they shouldn't be seeing alcohol ads as they go, as well as students going to and from that station. So I urge you to think about this issue, not only for kids, but the communities of color, especially here in the Bronx. As a first step, we would request that the MTA staff meet with us and the Finance Committee and our coalition members, including youth, clergy, and some health experts, to make a case to discuss this issue. Remember, our kids are seeing these ads on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mary Parison, and then Jason Pinheiro.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parison Lavelle, and I am the chair of a coalition called Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. I'm here today to speak about 2 issues. The first is that I ask that you direct your freight concession lease for a rebid as you have contemplated. President Nowakowski promised changes to the transfer agreement after the New York and Atlantic Hicksville derailment in 2015. Why should there be a renewal of a lease with a company who has an egregious performance with derailments in Hicksville, Jamaica, Wyandanch, an accident in Maspeth, Queens with a truck? This is the same company that was under a FRA safety review. This is a company that owes the Long Island Railroad thousands of dollars for these cleanups. We've requested had FOIL requests trying to find out how much money and how is owed to the Long Island Railroad and how much has been collected, and we have not been successful in finding this out. This is a private company receiving public subsidies for their profit. And so it's now time, 20 years later, for a rebid. The second issue I'd like to speak to you about is that Curis has advocated for legislative funding for a new MTA Long Island Railroad locomotive. And we're pleased to say that it once again has made it into the budget this year. We asked the board to ensure that all RFPs include an open competition for the cleanest Tier 4 locomotive, switcher locomotives. We asked to ensure that Anacostia Rail Holdings and New York and Atlantic Railway are not involved directly or indirectly involved through a consultant. The last procurement, New York and Atlantic Railway represented themselves as your lessee and agent experts, leading to the memorandum of understanding, specifically showing the winning manufacturer before the RFP was issued. And the winner was a prototype. It was a machine that didn't exist. It polluted more, cost $250,000 more than another bidder's machine. And we heard recently that these PR-20Bs have some fumes in the calves, and we're not even sure if this is substantiated. We also hadn't seen that $4 to $5 million purchase advertised in the New York State contractor reporter. So this cannot happen again. What we're saying is that it has to be an open, competitive bid, that experts need to speak to the manufacturers and their customers. It has to be a procurement that is open, clean, and transparent. The legislators initiated funding to reduce pollution, not to buy what a private company prefers to lease. So we ask you to take these considerations very seriously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Parison. Jason Pinheiro and then David Capel. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, starting the day hearing about banning alcohol ads in the subway is not the way to start an MTA meeting, but starting with it with real transit issues. First, it's a disgrace that those who live in Long Island, like Mitch, have to deal with massive delays because of Amtrak. It is time that the MTA takes over the ownership of Penn Station. And as a matter of fact, I found out that the MTA is being sued by not complying with the ADA Act. As a matter of fact, there's one particular station in Manhattan, 68th Street, Hunter College, that the neighbors on 69th Street, like we call it 69th Street NIMBYs, they're totally against adding a secondary entrance and having an elevator there. And second of all, I'm in favor of all procurements brought up, but we need people with brains, not bozos. So let's keep doing our job and do it correctly.
Thanks, Mr. Pinheiro. David Capel.
Good morning. My name is Dave Capel. I'm Executive Director of the Right Track for Long Island Coalition. And I'm here to speak to you on the environmental review of the Long Island Railroad expansion project. Our coalition has 5,000 members, and we speak for nearly 2 million Long Islanders. We represent business, labor, philanthropy, research and educational institutions, not-for-profit, for-profit and environmental organizations, commuters, elected officials, and average citizens that believe that the project is the key to unlocking the full potential of the Long Island economy in the 21st century and to fully exploiting MTA investments in East Side Access and double track. We formed to help educate the public on the regional and local benefits of the project and promote public participation in the environmental review process. Nearly 200 of our members testified in person at 12 public hearings, and scores of others submitted written comments into the record before you. We commend the MTA and the Long Island Railroad for making good on Governor Cuomo's commitment to unprecedented outreach to the affected communities. And we commend the hard work of MTA officials John McCarthy and Shams Tarek, along with Lisa Black of the Governor's Office, whose exhaustive work on the ground in the affected communities paved way for the extraordinary project that has since evolved from this process. The environmental review was very thorough and seems to have addressed all the issues raised at the public hearings and did a great job mitigating any significant impacts and addressing community concerns and recommended numerous important community benefits. The project not only addresses the transportation needs of the region, it will transform the main line corridor and leave it far better off than it is now, thus ensuring that everyone comes out a winner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Capel. Edwin Frank. And has Angelo Ortiz arrived? Yes? Okay. You can wrap it up. Mr. Frank.
Good morning. I represent the town of Newcastle, and I don't know if you've gotten the handout yet, but I'm here to ask for a safety study If you don't have it, you will have it. And this is an affordable housing development that's proposed in Chappaqua, 15 feet from the railroad, on grade, and it is built on columns, and there's 35-car parking beneath. A proper safety study has never been done, and the only safety study that was done was to determine if there's any problems that would result from a train derailment to Metro North facilities, trains, etc. No proper safety study was ever done to determine what would happen to this building, 100 people living in the building, if there were a train derailment. I'm setting aside the fact the building's also located just 5 feet from the Sawmill River Parkway off-ramp. I'm setting aside the fact that it's on contaminated property that has to be decontaminated. I'm setting aside the fact that because the MTA gave a sublease to the developer, Conifer Realty, that there's going to be 28 units. 14 of them that face the railroad will have no windows that open. And that was in order to meet the state code. So I'm simply asking, it's very simple, please do a safety study to determine what would happen to this building if there were a train derailment. And Mr. Giletti has a copy of this letter, and hopefully it'll all be handed out to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. We have your correspondence, and we'll distribute it to the board. Final speaker is Angelo Ortiz.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My comments today are in relation to the MTA investment report, which is, I believe, it's on the agenda right now. My name is Angelo Ortiz. I work for Inwood Academy for Leadership. I'm here with my partners from Building Alcohol Ad-Free Transit, which is a coalition of over 160 health, youth, and community and faith organizations throughout New York City. I grew up in Washington Heights and Inwood of Dominican descent. I've had the opportunity to not fall into a negative cycle of behaviors. I was able to get my master's in social work, and part of what I do is I talk to kids about making healthy choices. I work with middle school children and high school children. I've been doing this for about 25 years. And one of the challenges I have is being able to have my messages reinforced once they get outside of my presence, once they get outside of the positive environment of the school. It's literally an onslaught of temptation and seduction with negative behaviors. So I'm here to call on the MTA Board to consider adding alcohol to your list of prohibited advertising and your advertising policy. Our kids come primarily from Washington Heights, Inwood, and the West Bronx, and when they most of them take public transit. And when they get on the train, this is an example of what they see. This is 161st Street and River Avenue, and those are alcohol advertisements on the turnstiles. So, and this is just one example. Some of the other examples that they see is they see young adults drinking, imbibing. They see messages of self-esteem, be a man, have fun. And this is what they're seeing when they go home. And actually, in reality, what we see and what we hear from them is when they're not in school, if it's the weekend or if it's the summer or a break, they are drinking, they are, and which opens the door to other behaviors. They'll smoke, they'll do other things. They see this behavior as part of this is what it means to be young and independent and making my own choices and being my own person. Advertising affects more than we think it does. So we think we're good at ignoring the ads, but in fact they actually do get into our head. And it's subtle, and that's the purpose of the advertisement, to leave an imprint in your brain that later on you connect with something that you think is positive for yourself. New York City subways and buses basically function as the yellow school bus. for 670,000 New York City school children. Other cities have removed alcohol advertising from the transit system. I encourage this board to consider the same. Advertisers are quite aware of the young audience they're reaching. The advertising contractor for the MTA brags in its sales material that it delivers ads to a completely captive audience of students, including diverse and ethnic writers. All that said, this is a very unique opportunity for this board to do the right thing. I think in the long run, this will make a very big impact. If the kids can get to school without being bombarded by messages that it is cool to drink, you're helping me and my colleagues do our jobs to reinforce positive messages and healthier choices as they get older. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ortiz. Thanks to all of our speakers. That concludes the public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murillo. I'd like to begin today by talking about an extraordinary member of our MTA family who is with us today and joined by his bride and his daily companion. It's MTA Police Officer Daniel McDade. Officer McDade's birthday was about a month ago, on March 16. And on that day, he was driving into Grand Central Terminal, where he's assigned as a canine officer. He was stuck in traffic on the Bruckner, so he decided to try a different route along White Plains Road, where he saw a terrible scene unfolding before his eyes. He watched an EMT exit an ambulance in front of him, and then saw that ambulance careen wildly out of control. It ran over the EMT and crashed into other cars before the driver stumbled out of the vehicle. Officer McDade sprang into action. He jumped out of his car and confronted the man at gunpoint. Working with two good Samaritans, Officer McDade subdued the man and quickly attended to the critically injured EMT. Yadira Arroyo, a 44-year-old mother of 5 and 14-year veteran of the FDNY, who was tragically killed that morning. But we should all be grateful for the good luck that brought Officer McDade to us, and that he was able to intercede and prevent any broader threat to public safety. Officer McDade, would you please join us at the front of the boardroom with your bride and your partner, as well as your chief, the two chairs of our commuter rail committees, and Presidents Giletti and Nowakowski, and of course our executive director, Ronnie Hakem. Officer McDade, your courage and your instincts to immediately confront a threat almost certainly saved lives that day. That's why now, as a small token of our appreciation, I'd like to present this to Officer Daniel McDade for his bravery, his heroism, and for putting his life on the line every single day to protect New York, and for representing all of the MTA police colleagues who do the very same. Thank you once again, Officer McDade. And now I'd like to say a few words about a key member of our executive team who's retiring next month, the president of MTA Capital Construction, Dr. Michael Haradnachenu. Dr. Haradnachenu has been heading up capital construction for nearly 10 years, overseeing some of the most ambitious MTA projects in a generation, culminating in the on-time opening of the first phase of the 2nd Avenue subway. Michael has a well-deserved reputation as a leader who thinks creatively to solve some of the thorniest engineering challenges. Michael, I'd like to say to you, on behalf of everyone at the MTA and the board, thank you for everything you've done and given to our region. Thank you for your service, and the very best wishes to you, your bride, and your family. Michael?
Thank you, and I do expect to be one more time here on the 24th of May. That will be actually probably my last physical appearance at MTA, at least in this current incarnation.
And before we wrap up at least this part of it, I'd like to take a quick moment to note that Earth Day occurred this past weekend, or this weekend. We all know that one of the best things you can do to help the environment is to ride public transportation every day. The MTA is actually the original ride sharing, as we like to say. Every day is Earth Day at the MTA. So I want to highlight a report. Well, yeah, why not? I want to highlight a report released today by the MTA's Climate Adaptation Task Force. Its first annual resiliency report reminds us that climate change is an urgent reality and we must confront head-on with dangers like rising sea levels and more powerful storms threatening our coastal infrastructure. The report also gives an overview to some of the 40-plus resiliency projects we've currently completed or that are ongoing to prepare for the future. It's available at mta.info/sustainability, and we can also get you a hard copy if you like. The minutes of last month's meeting have been distributed to all members. May I have a motion to approve? Second. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. And now I'll ask Mr. Lawrence Schwartz for our Finance Committee report. Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So formal this morning. The Finance Committee met on Monday, and I'd like to report on the following. There are 2 action items for board approval. The first action item requests the board approve First Mutual Transportation Assurance Company to undertake a capital markets-based reinsurance program by expanding its current program to include catastrophic bond-based reinsurance transactions and collateralized note reinsurance transactions placed through a capital markets-based online marketplace. That was a mouthful. The second action item requests the board approve the MTA 2016 Annual Investment Report and the MTA All-Agency Investment Guidelines. The committee recommends these action items, and I move them.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Is there a second? Any questions, comment, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 competitive procurement items this month in the total amount of $5.9 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there discussion? Comment? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Merdler abstains. Is there anything, is there any vote against? The items pass.
There are no non-competitive procurements and no ratifications. There are 3 real estate action items which are described on pages 47 through 51 in the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The items carry.
That concludes the Finance Committee report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I chaired this month's Transit Committee and report the following. There are 8 procurement actions this month on the total amount of $401.4 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements for New York City Transit in the amount of $30.3 million, described on pages 56 through 61 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. There are 4 competitive procurements, 3 for New York City Transit, totaling $366.5 million, described on pages 62 through 66 of the board book, and 1 for MTA Capital Construction, $3.4 million, described on pages 67 and 68 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. There was 1 ratification for $1.2 million for MTA Capital Construction, described on pages 69 through 71 of the board book. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The ratification carries. That concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Metzger for her report on the Joint Committee of Metro North and Long Island Railroad.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Railroad Committee and the Long Island Railroad Committee met jointly on Monday and report the following. There is 1 action item for Long Island Railroad. The action item requests the board adopt the seeker findings statement relating to the Long Island Railroad expansion project. The committee recommends the action, and I move it.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries.
There are 4 procurement items in the total amount of $33.9 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 4 competitive procurements, 2 for Metro North Railroad in the amount of $33.9 million, and 2 to authorize the request for proposals process for Long Island Railroad. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry.
There are no ratifications, and this concludes the Joint Railroad Committee report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 10 procurement actions this month in the amount of $190.7 million. There's 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $7 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? Any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry.
There are 9 competitive procurements in the amount of $183.7 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry.
There are no ratifications. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels report.
Thank you. And now may I have a motion to convene an executive session?
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, indulge. As you know, the last couple of weeks have not been easy, being a Long Island Railroad commuter, for a variety of reasons. And I would request the acting executive director provide us with an update as to where conversations are with regard to our friends at Amtrak, and I use that word deliberately. I'm running out of words to explain the current situation. I think I have to go back to adult ed to get words more than intolerable and unacceptable, but I wish you'd bring us up to date as to where things are.
Sure. So after the first week in April, where we all suffered through a very difficult week for the Long Island Railroad and its customers, really frustrating, the chair and I, as you may recall, sent Amtrak a letter requesting their immediate an explanation as well as action about what the circumstances were. That was followed by a meeting about 2 weeks ago that the chair and Pat Nowakowski and I and some senior leadership had. Amtrak explained to us at that time that they were in the process of an inspection program around the tracks and the train shed. That was called for by the FRA, and the FRA inspectors were joining them on that process. Tomorrow, the chair and I will be hearing the follow-up from that. And what we expect, and they have committed to provide us a review of what they found, the repairs that they've been doing, what their plans are, and while it's early to anticipate potential service impacts, but what that might be. Amtrak has committed to coordinating with us. We called for it. We expect it. I think on your behalf, they've heard loud and clear the frustrations expressed here as well as by us. It goes without saying that the safety of our customers, our crews, are our top priority. We need to know that we are traveling over a safe train infrastructure, and clearly the status quo, which as you point out continues, it is not acceptable. So something needs to be done, and we look forward to hearing details about it. And when you hear about the need for a detailed repair and recovery plan on rail, that goes with a level of granularity that needs to then be studied by planners to figure out how to do that work in a way that minimizes the impacts to our customers. But again, until we have insight and eyes on what those plans are, it's a little too soon. But at the end of this, I think, speaking with the chair, we are actively engaged and expect that level of constructive dialogue with Amtrak to continue, because I think we've all run out of words. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank many of the members of the BAFT Coalition who came to talk to the board today and educate us about the occurrence and placement of alcohol advertising throughout our system. And it's something that I'd like to understand a little further. Can MTA staff provide information to the full board about the placements of various categories of ads throughout the entire system, system-wide, not just subways and buses, not just alcohol? I'd like to have a better understanding of the categories of advertising, whether it's real estate, events, alcohol in particular. It's my understanding that tobacco advertising is not allowed on our system. Is that correct? And it's also my understanding that the revenue that we obtain solely from alcohol advertising is, of course, always needed in this system, but significant in the overall, insignificant in the overall finance budget. And I think that we should explore some other ways. I know that drug abuse, and alcohol we all know is a drug, is particularly acute in our young communities, and not just in our communities of color. We know that it is acute in communities of young people in the suburbs and in New York City, which is why I'm asking for an analysis of where this advertising is being placed system-wide, because I am a frequent user of the entire system, the subways, the buses, LIRR, Metro North, and based on my own anecdotal experiences, I have noticed this placement in the city and not so much in the suburban communities, and I'd like to understand that better. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Schwartz.
Sorry. Would you age before beauty? Yeah, I would just want to follow up with what Mitch said, having been a former Long Islander. Ron, I would just ask that you get an assurance from Amtrak in your meeting tomorrow that they will make no decisions going forward until we thoroughly have the opportunity to understand what is going on, what their recommendations are. This is going to have an impact on 250,000 daily Long Island railroad riders, and they deserve more. I want to make sure that the governor has been thoroughly briefed and he has his opportunity to weigh in here on what he thinks needs to be done as the governor of our state. So there's been enough going on. I know the chairman of Amtrak, Tony Kosher, he's a professional and a gentleman, and I believe he is there to do the right thing, but we really fully got to understand what the long-term impact here. Obviously, safety of the riders is paramount, but it's got to be done in a way that doesn't inconvenience the ridership that need to use the Long Island Railroad to get to work each and every day. This has a tremendous impact on their quality of life as it would anyone else on any other transit system, and we have to be not only thorough about it, we have to be smart about it, and we really got to think through a long-term strategy without inconveniencing the ridership. Thank you.
Mr. Vidiello, and then Dr. Metzger.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. I had asked a question in committee, the response to which was taken in some quarters to indicate that the MTA was considering some type of legal action against Amtrak. And I want to be clear that my question was not intended to suggest that. It was only intended to explore, as any commercial enterprise would when you're having a problem with your landlord, what the rights and obligations are between the parties. But I hope and fully expect that these issues will be resolved with our partners at Amtrak collaboratively, and I don't want the continued perception that we're behind the scenes here preparing to run to a courthouse, because that is clearly not the case. We need to work this out collaboratively. It's incredibly important, and I have every hope and belief that we will do so as partners.
Thank you, Mr. Vidiello. That's our expectation as well. Dr. Metzger.
First, I appreciate your comments because I feel very much the same way. However, what I wanted to add is the fact that the west of Hudson Metro North riders frequently, myself included, come through the Penn Station. And so both of our railroads are impacted in one way or another. So we have a substantial reason to really have a clear understanding of what's going on. Thank you.
May I now have a motion to convene an executive session to discuss a matter relating to collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Officers Law? Is there a second? All in favor? We are in executive session. May I have a motion to go out of executive session? Second. All in favor? While in executive session, the board voted on matters relating, as I mentioned earlier, to collective bargaining agreements. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll start again. I wondered if you could tell us if you've met with Amtrak and they've told you what their plan is for closing down some tracks as they try to repair the tracks at Penn Station, and if you have any sense of what effect it will have on the ridership of the Long Island Railroad and Metro North.
We have had a previous meeting with Amtrak, did not discuss these particulars because they were unknown to us at the time. We have another scheduled meeting tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, where we will deal with this amongst other issues.
But are you frustrated? Are you angry that there's all this uncertainty for your riders?
Our job is to advocate for our riders, see to their safety and their convenience. And it is annoying to read these things in the papers, but I'm not going to comment on them beyond that because they haven't been told to us directly by Amtrak, and that's one of the purposes of tomorrow's meeting. Ronnie Hakem, would you like to add anything to that?
So, as the chairman said, right after the beginning of April, when we started to have that horrible week for our Long Island Railroad customers, we had an initial meeting with the leadership of Amtrak. Follow-up meeting is tomorrow. In the intervening time period, our understanding is that Amtrak has been doing a series of inspections along the Penn train shed. We expect, and they've committed to telling us what their findings are and what their at least current view of the needed repairs will be. At that point, what we do know is that the status quo doesn't seem to be acceptable. We continue to have problems in that area. And so what we're hoping to hear is what their plans are. And then what happens is railroad planners have to get together, work together to understand what the potential service impact would be. And then we have to agree and understand what their process will be going forward.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, so I understand the urgency here, are there discussions today? Why wait till tomorrow? Why not learn right now what their plan is? Pick up the phone, call the executive director and say, what's the plan? How does it impact LIRR? And how quickly can we develop a response to that?
What they told us 2 weeks ago is that they needed 2 weeks to come up with a plan. My understanding is that's what we're going to hear tomorrow. The ability for us to receive information and have our experts look at it and our engineers look at it and give us information as to the viability of those plans will be a series of meetings. It's not a one-day event.
And our expectation is that we will do this together.
Have you developed contingency plans for what appears to be the eventuality of certain periodic, prolonged daytime outages?
Again, that's a little far into the future right now, and I'd rather not speculate on what we'd be doing. We always have contingency plans. Again, and I don't want to be repetitive, but our principal concern is the safety and reliability of the ride for our passengers. That said, we want to see what they are putting on the table and work with us to reduce the impact, mitigate the impact on our riders.
I had a question about the procurement for the Nova bus contract. It includes 200 buses for the April 1st, 2019 for the L train shutdown. And there's been a recent push by North Brooklyn politicians to call for electric buses, which are only 10 are included in this package. Do you have any comment on that, and if there will be any increase in that kind of buses?
We have a few coming online, I believe, toward the end of the year.
If you don't mind. So electric bus technology is new for us. We are leasing the first 5 of what will be a 10-bus group. As you know, New York City streets are pretty hard on buses, and so we want to make sure that before we go out with a larger investment in electric buses, that this is a wise and prudent investment.
How much of a say will you have when you meet with Amtrak? How much of a say will you have about the schedule, about whatever work they need to do?
We expect to have as much of a say as all the users and partners at Penn. That includes New Jersey Transit and Amtrak itself.
A question for you, Mr. Ferrer, and for Ani here, and about the excuse me. I had a question about some of the discussion that was brought up on Monday about having the MTA take over Penn Station. Is there any level, is there anything you'd like to comment on that idea, and also would like that answer from the MTA level? Is there anything officials are talking about internally about taking over Penn Station and how that could work?
For me, no. Ronnie? Okay, that was quick. Anybody else?
Hi. There was a lot of discussion among the board about how whatever Amtrak's plan is, it needs to minimize impact on riders. I think some board members even talked about not wanting any impact at all. Is there some level of disruption for the Long Island Railroad that you will accept and you understand is necessary for Amtrak to be able to do this work?
I can't put our tolerance level at a certain place. I mean, we've seen major disruptions, obviously, a couple of weeks ago. Long Island Railroad service was impacted for nearly 1 work week. That's a lot of impact. And that requires our riders to be very tolerant. And they are. They're patient. But that patience and tolerance runs its course, so we expect our meeting tomorrow to be fruitful.
So the city's city ferry service is launching soon, and it's not going to be integrated with the MTA fare payment technology. The mayor has expressed that he's hopeful that it will eventually be integrated. Can you refresh my memory as to why the MTA and the city are not working together with the same fare payments, and what do you have to say to him saying that, you know, that's a possibility for the future?
I can't actually respond to that. I haven't seen a proposal from the city on it. Certainly, anything that the mayor has to say or anything the city has to put forward, we pay attention to.
So did they not reach out to you before?
I'm unaware of it. Are you, Ronnie? No.
The MTA has taken a lot of criticism recently from disability advocates who say that there's not enough stations who have access for wheelchairs, and those that do, the elevators frequently break down or are out of service and are, aren't clean, that sort of thing. Why is it taking the MTA so long to get access to more disabled riders, and what does it plan to do to fix that in the future?
Well, let's separate the issues. We take maintenance and good repair of our elevators and escalators seriously, and we're reviewing those processes internally right now. We always want to find a better way and quicker way to do it. There are currently 117 stations that are handicap accessible. All of our buses are handicap accessible, and as you know, we operate and subsidize Access-a-Ride for everyone, not only within the city limits, but some places outside the city limits. We have been working with the disabled community since 1990 as a result of a consent order, and we're in full compliance with it. In this capital plan alone, there is $1 billion set aside for more accessibility to make 25 more stations fully accessible. So we're doing, what we can. We understand the urgency because, look, if you're wheelchair bound, it's not easy to get around anywhere. But we try to make that ride a little better with some of the other things that we offer. To try to make our system more accessible.
I know that you said that the goal is to work collaboratively with Amtrak, but what are the legal or financial options available with regards to the tenant-landlord relationship?
Interesting way you frame that, tenant-landlord relationship. Look, all I can say is we'd like to work collaboratively. It's in everybody's best interest. New Jersey riders, and by the way, our riders from Metro North come in through New Jersey to Penn. Long Island Railroad riders as well as Amtrak riders. We all share the same region, we all share the same facility, and there's an obvious rising level of discontent about it. We've let them know about it. You have reported amply on that level of discontent. We expect the meeting tomorrow to be fruitful and productive. More than that, I can't say right now until the meeting occurs. But they know our expectations here.
In addition to all the problems at Penn Station, the subway has also had a string of difficult commutes this weekend, or in the last week or so. Do you think that public confidence is shaken, and in the atmosphere that we're in now, where you even have senators warning of a transit apocalypse?
If you mean the Con Ed outage at 53rd Street, we got our arms around that as quickly as we could. working with Con Ed, it was their outage. And that's just a fact. With respect to all the other things that we expect or don't expect, we put a lot of time and attention and resources behind safety and a state of good repair. And I think that's proving out. Look, is a system that carries millions of people a day and is stretched to capacity perfect? No. But I think we do a pretty good job.
My question's short, so it's a two-parter. First of all, is the meeting tomorrow with CEO Wick Moorman, Amtrak CEO Wick Moorman? And secondly, with all the challenges the MTA is facing, some of us were wondering whether Ronnie might be elevated to the full leadership role by the end of June when the session is over, or another leader might be named.
If you'd like me to comment on the selection process, I can't. It is my expectation that we are going to have a permanent chairman. It is my hope we are going to have, my fervent hope, that we are going to have a permanent chairman by June. With respect to the first question you asked, I expect Mr. Moorman will be joining us by video conference. He's in another part of the country. I'm sorry? The other meeting will be, yes, the larger meeting will be here. Yeah, right? Yeah.
You guys have been in this room a long time, and LIRR delays are certainly nothing new. Do you think riders deserve a little more maybe outrage from this agency regarding that? And could you characterize maybe the tone that you're going to take there tomorrow? Because going to Penn Station, riders would probably like to be at that meeting tomorrow and would deliver a message there. And then as the second part, when it comes to transit delays, why can't you just ride? Why can't you just send more trains down the tracks? Put more trains, run more trains.
Put more trains on what tracks? If we had more and we're ordering more, we'd be happy to do it. That's the entire point. Well, not the entire point of the order of new rail cars. Put more on the tracks, retire some that are really unreliable and well beyond their useful life. When you're talking about tone and outrage, I think you've seen me a couple of times doing this turn. I don't bang on podiums and try not to. I had my time a long time ago making speeches. This is about trying to get results and working collaboratively with people who can make those results happen. As you can see from the tone of our letter and the tone of our comments, we're firm in our expectation that our riders will not be put out any further. We're firm in that. Thank you.